back. Yay, thank you. I don't know what your family is like, but you guys ever like invite a group of people over and then you're amazed they actually come? It's like, that's my history. I just think, wow, they came, you know? What if you give a party and nobody comes? There you go. There's my story. What's yours? You know, what's going on? How are you guys now after these last couple meetings? I want to know how things are happening at home, and I want to know from each of you. We talked about what some of your goals might be in here. I want to keep aware of those, have those a little in the background, and let Kelly continue to think about it unless you've come up with what you think at this point about goals. Because that was one thing we left off on. So I'm going to, unlike the last two, I just want to see where is each of you at? Who wants to start? What's going on? How are things now? And where do we need to go to get you guys out of hell? Family hell.
Well, I feel that I'm been kind of jerky. I don't like to admit that, but maybe I've not been understanding or trying to understand Kelly as much as I should. And I kind of think that, but I'm worried, Amanda and I aren't going to live forever. And yeah, Kelly's under our house now, in our house, but what's going to happen when we're gone?
Did you say Kelly's under your house now? That's an interesting idea.
That's a poor way of saying she's under our roof.
She's under your roof.
Maybe under the house also, but no.
All right. So you're concerned that she's under your roof now and that you aren't going to live forever, and so what's going to happen?
Well, I don't know what's going to happen when Amanda and I are gone. Will Kelly be able to be okay or not? I think Anne's going to. I've been a jerk, but part
Eric,
of that's my concern.
How do you know Annie's going to be okay?
She's doing well in school. She's good athletically, things like that, and she seems to, get along with the rest of us pretty well.
Okay, I hear. I wanted to know what your logic was. I just don't know, because I don't know how Annie's doing. I actually don't know. And I'm not sure that how they're each doing is much of a predictor of how they're going to do 5 years from now. I just don't know. I don't know them well enough to know what they're going through. But I hear you're worried. So you're anxious about that. How are other people doing in the family?
I mean, don't you think, Doc, that it's kind of fucked up that my dad never wanted to know why I want to kill him?
That you what?
That he's never wanted to know why I wrote that?
I don't know if it's fucked up, but it's a good question, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
But I don't know if he doesn't want to know. But he hasn't asked at home. I mean, he hasn't asked in here, but I've hardly given him a chance either. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Do you want to ask him that?
Why do you think I'm so fucking angry at you?
Because I haven't, I've been very critical of you compared to your sister and your mom, and so it ticked you off a lot more than I thought.
Is that so? That's your theory. Are you interested in checking out with her whether that's what led her to think about killing you?
Well, I'd like to think, well, sometimes I don't like to think about that. Maybe that's a problem. But I like to think that that's not what she really wants to do or wanted to do.
Yeah. So you didn't say to her, hey, by the way, both of you, I appreciate your courage. This is one of the hardest conversations I can imagine two people having in a family. So thank you for really trying. It's a really hard one. And I want to say that what I notice you aren't asking her, this is where she's on target, you aren't asking her, did she really want to kill you? You're hoping that she didn't, but she's right over there. Is there any chance of you guys getting further with this, or is there some reason we can't kind of try to get down to what was going on? I don't want you to go further than you think you can go, Eric, but you're kind of jumping past some steps.
That's really hard for me to ask. I can ask it.
I don't want to make you ask it because I respect your caution. As I'm trying to put myself in your shoes as a dad, that would be a scary thing to ask.
Well, maybe we can shorten the sessions a little bit, skip a couple if I do have the courage to ask Kelly.
Do what?
There's an attempt to be funny that I'm saving some money if we skip ahead a few steps rather than just wait around for me to come up with asking her.
He's always about saving the money.
What?
He's always about saving the money.
Is that, you think you meant that seriously? Yeah? Well, you know him better than I do, but I also thought there was a humorous edge to it, too. But I understand that.
What the hell is funny about this?
I
You're joking about money? She's right here. Talk to her, Dad. Talk to her. Ask her, Kelly, why the fuck did you want to kill me? This is painful.
You're supposed to be the good daughter.
Fuck you.
Wait. No. Hey. I appreciate you jumping in. I really do. Because I think, this has the chance of moving the ball forward. But when you get to that language, it has the chance of moving the ball backward. I'm sorry, guys, but and it may not be
I
your
apologize,
own limit,
Dad.
but I have a limit there.
I understand.
Okay. But I don't want to take away from where you were heading. I really don't. Because I think where you're heading is trying to get them to be more direct, or getting your dad to be more direct with your sister.
And if he tells me that I'm supposed to be the good one more time,
Oh, really?
I'm just going to freak out.
Oh, really? How interesting. You're suddenly...
It's been going on since our last session.
Yeah?
You kind of pointed it out and held up the mirror, and I've just been kind of like, well, I feel like I'm carrying around a bag of rocks, and I'm over it.
Yeah. People might not first think that being considered the good girl, the good kid, is so great, or is not so great. But it is. There is a downside, isn't there? Especially when you're sitting next to someone you love, someone you support, and you see her talked about in a very different way. That's got to be very hard.
He won't even talk to her.
What?
He won't even talk to her.
won't
He'll
talk
look
to her.
me in the eye and acknowledge me, but he won't even look at my sister.
I want to ask Amanda. You've been quiet listening to this, and I know you probably have deep thoughts about a lot of this, and I wonder if, in a way, we're kind of like saying maybe or maybe not it's a good idea if this conversation between father and daughter take place. Like, would everybody really be ready to handle the truth and take it further? And I want to know kind of where are you at about this? You're sitting between them. I don't know if you think you're the referee or something.
And right now I do feel like the referee.
Yeah?
I feel like my loyalties are divided and it's really uncomfortable. And I also think it's true that we really do need to have this conversation, even though it's going to be really painful. And it's something that we haven't talked about. We haven't talked about in these sessions. We haven't talked about it at home. And it is kind of the elephant in the room, not hearing Kelly say, this is what was going on, this is why I had this plan.
Sometimes in a family or sometimes in any group of people, there is an elephant in the room that stops everything else. And, even though there's 4 of you here and you're all complicated, interesting people, sometimes if people get like this, 2 people, everybody knows it, and it's not getting settled, and it kind of holds up everything. And I think that might be happening here. I mean, there's a lot to discuss here. about all of you, but we're getting sort of stuck on this. So there is this question. I want to make a suggestion, and it starts with you, Kelly, but it also comes to you, Eric. And it's kind of like, I've been in these situations before. It's an extremely hard thing to do. I respect both of you, you for pushing it, and you for being cautious about how much of this you want to hear right now. I'd like to have a meeting with you, Kelly, where we really think about what do you want to say to your father, and really how to, and prepare, and maybe even have you write it out. Sometimes I find that helpful. You write it out. It's an assignment. You write down, here's what I want to say to my father. Because sometimes just blurting it out in the middle of an emotional situation, it doesn't come out the way you want. You want it to get it across. Really nail your point, and don't say things that'll distract too much from it. So I want to work with you on being skillful in laying that out. And then I'd want to get you prepared, maybe both of you, or maybe you as a team, to get you prepared to hear it and think about what it could be. And are you ready? And what would be the worst thing she could say? And things like that. I think we should really take this a little seriously, because I actually think this is a big deal. And we can't just sort of like, okay, let's take 5 minutes and get past this little snag. I think this isn't a snag, right? You know what I mean? This is like a roadblock. And I don't even know whether it can be resolved really well, but I'd like to have it out there. Okay? So you're willing to do that? You willing to do that? You can bring your sister if you want. It's up to you. Just as a sort of like, on that show Jeopardy, this is your helpline over here. So you can call her for an idea. You seem extremely capable yourself of putting yourself into words. So I think it's more just a matter of helping you say exactly what you want to say, and making it effective, making your father actually hear what you mean. Because there is a dance going on, don't you guys think? It's don't you want to hear, Dad? I don't know. It's like, don't you want to hear, Dad? And then your other daughter says, Dad, what's the matter with you? And sometimes if more than one person says what's the matter with you, it's actually something the matter with you. And I just want to say, and since there's something the matter with everybody, maybe it's your turn to be realizing that actually there's something hard about this for you. I can only imagine. I'm sort of covering for you here, Eric, because I don't want her to just come out and hit you between the eyes with a truth that might be painful. I've been there as a dad, and I think it helps if it's prepared. I don't want you to be knocked out,
Okay.
So you'll go with that plan? All right, we're going to stop this right now and stay up here for just a minute. Okay. First, thank you guys. And for making it more difficult, too. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now I want you guys to have a chance to speak, including to make any comment or for them to ask you anything, but also for you to ask anything. So let's start up here. Yeah.
I feel like my brother I have an older brother, and
Okay.
I started getting sick and having problems, and my brother became, as an adult, the lost child in the family.
Oh.
And I feel like in that scenario, you called them into a meeting, and I was an option. And my brother, I watched that happen in my family. And now, as a result, my brother is off in Austin, and we see him every so often, and he thinks
That's
we're
your
weird.
hypothesis.
He
That's
thinks
why that
we're
happened.
well. Okay, fair enough.
Just want to clarify. That's a thought. You don't know that happened that reason, but I get it that in this situation, it reminded you of that situation about your brother being left out of things when the focus was on you. Is that what you mean?
No, I meant in the therapeutic scenario we have here, you talked about a meeting between the three of them, and it was optional for me to go.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, it wasn't I wasn't incorporated with the rest of the family because I just thought that was interesting.
No, okay, that's a really good point. And so, if I was actually you guys' family therapist, either that might occur to me later, and I might feel, or you might bring it to my attention, like you just did, or somebody else might bring it to my attention. And then is the key about as a therapist, because how many mistakes do we make per session? A lot.
Sure.
We just do. I mean, it's the nature of this kind of work. This is not counting pennies coming down a conveyor belt.
Right.
That's hard too, actually. But it's like, but you have a little. The stakes are not quite as high, maybe. But it's very hard work, and the chances of making a mistake, if you even want to call it that, however, it depends on your perspective. It's tough. So in a way, the most important moments of therapy are when the therapist gets challenged for having not done something or done something. And then I think in DBT, it's really hard because you feel like defending yourself. But there comes this point where you have to say, I don't know, that's a good point. That's a good point, Annie. If you brought that up in a session, I might have to struggle with that.
Well, I just used really bad language, so I felt a little guilty. So I was like, I'll just say something after.
You'll do what?
No, I was making a joke.
Okay.
I'm just.
Yeah, I get it. No, I think that's a really good point. It's hard to work with families, partly for that reason. A lot of people just prefer to have one other person in the room because there's only one other person. The chances of leaving people out or creating conflict or dealing with just when you think this is a problem, you're the problem. Just when you think she's the problem, actually she's the problem. And so it's how do you keep all the balls going? If this is chess, you don't want to neglect any one player for too long. But yeah, I think it was unbalanced at that moment. And it might be me falling into a pattern that is not great. I'm influenced by personal history of therapies I've done. And actually with one of my sons that was once in a residential treatment, and we had family therapy every week, and this is how they would prepare, and it was such a brilliant way they handled it that I was impressed. He was 16 at the time, and they would have him write down, what do you want to say to your dad this week? What do you want to say to your mom this week? And then his older brother came once for a weekend. What do you want to say to your brother? And so they would work on that all week. And then they would sit down with one of us, whoever it was, or with all of us, and then read it. And then just sit and read it. And she would somehow give us a warning if something tough was coming. And then she would try to help us cope with it. And it was brilliant. I mean, it was the best therapy I think I've ever had, was what she did. And so I had that in mind, but it might not fit this situation. I wanted to help her. I could just hear this. I'm not sure I wanted to hear from her yet, because she could blurt it out in a way that's going to lose out on the value of it. I really believe in people just giving it to people, like very direct. It's not death. Well, this could have been, now that I think of it. But actually, probably the case is that if she could give it to him in that way, she wouldn't need to write stuff like that on her computer, because she'd feel empowered to state her point of view about what her father's done, which he underestimates, because there's no way to know what it's like. God, we hurt our kids a lot without realizing until later that hurt, and we underestimate the pain of criticism, so I think it goes on all the time. Any other things any of you wanted to say or ask? Anyone else? Comments about this? Yeah.
I don't know if this is pertinent to what you just said, but the observation, and forgive me, but the sequence of events was you were talking to Kelly's character, and saying that you wanted to talk with her and then the father separately. And then you said I may include the wife as a team, and then went back to Kelly and said we may include your sister. So it kind of, going back to the flux observation, it was in flux, and I could see that your point
Okay.
Do you know what he means?
I do, and I kind of want to make something clear. That was not a criticism of you or this therapeutic process.
Yeah.
I was in treatment with a young lady whose brother was severely mentally ill, and he cut her a lot. And the family was so focused on him that they didn't protect her from being beaten by her brother. And I'm really sensitive to that.
sensitive
So
to that.
that's why I was like, hold on, we've just identified that the whole family is messed up.
Yeah, right.
And and maybe you can come. And it was kind of like, wait.
Yeah, right.
That's all.
You know, and I think the story there, and I'm glad you said that, because you can't not be personal in these things. There isn't like the right way to be. I mean, I'm influenced by a personal story. Should that be part of what I'm bringing in here? I'm sorry whether it should or not. It's who I am.
Right.
And the question is whether I acknowledge it or not, whether I know it or not. I mean, then I have to
I
think,
can't unknow
is that a
that.
good idea, or was that just a good idea with my son in that setting? Because it could be that. So, but it is true that while you do this, you have to watch that. It's like things are moving. All the parts are moving. And the more people you get in the room, the more parts are moving at once. And you can't follow them all at once. And so the question is how you move back, you move around. You say, I might have said, I just realized I left you out of this. You know, I know I might. That's not unusual. And because I'm realizing, or that's why I turned to Amanda at a certain point. She hadn't talked yet. Will you have another little sign? Yeah. That? Oh, is that one? What do we got? A 3? We need to be done in 3 minutes. Okay. All right, thanks. I don't mean to be giving you a hard time, but I am, I think. Sorry, I just am. But I actually appreciate what you're doing, and I really like it. It's just, I don't like, just a life history. When I'm interrupted, it's tough. I'm just that way. I was doing a workshop in Maine, Portland, Maine, like this. It was the same level, except there wasn't a stage, so I'm standing there. There was some room. It was with behavioral tech, and when I trained for them. And there was a new event manager managing the event who was sitting over on the side with some AV equipment. And I'm up at the front, and I'm teaching, and I'm engaged in it the way I get engaged in teaching, because I love it. And I'm like in working with people and talking and trying to get my ideas out. And the new event manager walks up and stands in front of me, facing me while I'm talking. And I said, Miranda, what are you doing? I'm in the middle of teaching. And she said, would you like a Diet Coke? And she had one. She said, would you like a Diet Coke? And I said, not now. What are you doing? She said, your fly's open. Your fly's down, or something like that. And I looked at her, stunned, and I said, oh, thank you. So then I said, you can go now. She goes back to the side. I had just been teaching about DBT teams, consultation team. And I just made I made lemonade out of lemons, because I said, now, you know, I've been talking to you about teams, and what do team members do for each other? And this is a brand new team member, Miranda, first workshop, and she just came, and she just was brilliant. She just came up and told me that my fly is down. It's still down at that point. My fly is down. And she brought me a Diet Coke in order to tell me. I said, and she really took a risk. And that's a team member, man. They're willing to put their body on the line when you're making an ass of yourself. And so now, what was really interesting about it, and it really showed teamwork, is she was over there watching me teach. She saw that my fly was down, and then she said, then she was sitting there thinking, oh my God, what do I do? Do I just do nothing? I mean, they must see it. It's like, she'd never been in this position. So what does she do? She gets on her cell phone and she contacted the vice president of behavioral tech, Helen Best. And she calls Helen, who's in New Zealand at that moment, wakes her up and says, Helen, Charlie is teaching, and he has his fly down, and I don't know what to do. So they're doing this while I'm teaching. And then Helen said, get a Diet Coke and go up and stand right in front of him. He's going to hate you for it. And then tell him he's got his zipper down, and then he'll love you for it. She did all this, and then I learned that, and then I came back and told them, this is a DBT team, does these things. And then I looked at the people in the front row, and I said, and you guys, what kind of teammates are you? Would I take you anywhere with me? I mean, you guys just going to let your teammates, so to speak, hang out there to dry? It was very funny. Anyway, we can end on a laughing note.
How many of those 3 minutes are left now?
5 seconds. Well, let me tell you the one about... Guys, I just want to tell you, ending like this is very nice. I always end thinking, oh no, I didn't teach this, or I didn't teach that, or we didn't go far enough into this or that. That it just turns out I always think that. So I've never not thought that. If I ever actually finish everything fully on time and stuff, it usually means I didn't cover stuff very well. I mean, I just got through everything. So there's always a dialectic, and I really appreciated teaching you. You know what it's like. I'm sure a lot of you have been teachers or are teachers. And, when you have a group as receptive as you, as welcoming, as interested, it's a home run. It's just wonderful. So I want to thank you for that. A lot of you have thanked me for things in the workshop, and I want to thank you for creating an atmosphere and participating in the way you did, because that's what makes it work. There's a lot more of you than there are me. You could have done it in. So thank you very much for this, and I like meeting all of you. Yeah. Do you need a mic?
So we're getting ready now to move into looking at BPD and marriage. So join me in welcoming Kathleen and Jim Payne. Sorry, Charles.
No.
This is a couple who have benefited from the things we've talked about today. They know the skills. They know the skills that Charlie's talked about. And they've been through Family Connections, and they've been through DBT. And, part of what we want to show is the results of the skills, when people have learned them. And so, as one of the families that were featured in one of the films that if you haven't seen, we really want you to see it, If Only We Had Known, which talks about, if only we had known the diagnosis, if only we had known about the treatment. And that's on the NEA BPD website, and they were featured in that. Well, together, they have created a presentation called Porcupine Love. So we are looking forward to hearing from you about how, oh, look at the porcupines. We're looking forward to hearing from you how you've put the skills into practice. So Jim and Kathleen, thank you.
Thank you. As she said, my name's Kathleen Payne, and I have been diagnosed with borderline. So with borderline, I've experienced, from the moment of birth really to present, just overwhelming rage and a bunch of other emotions, which when I look back at now, I can understand, but when I was growing up, it was really the overwhelming rage that I remember. But now I can see that I was suffering from feelings of inadequacy and loneliness and fear, worthlessness, and I was always just a hairbreadth away from wishing I were dead. I had heated arguments with my mom growing up. They were just very, very painful confrontations. And even though I was like the top of my high school class and got a full ride scholarship to college, I just felt so utterly hopeless and helpless when certain things would happen. Like I broke up with a college boyfriend and went to the top of the stadium to jump, and the campus police found me and made me promise to go to the student health center and get treatment. So that's when I saw my first psychiatrist. And they put me on antidepressants. Then I went to law school where I met Jim. And when we were dating, I told him about my medications and that I had been suicidal in the past.
So here we are in our early 20s, and I don't know a thing. I came out of engineering, part introvert, a little bit social, and I remember when you were saying that to me, I was like, I'm all of 24 or something. It's like, well, that was then and this is now, and that all happened before I was on the scene, and I can look back and poke more than a few holes on that, but that was honestly my thinking at the time that, I'd never seen depression or anything like that before. We'll move on and move through that.
And when we were dating, I thought, well, finally I'm going to feel loved, and when I get married, these strong emotions will not be a part of my life anymore. But I found out that the confrontations with my mom just transferred to confrontations with my husband. And I just had so much pain at the time. I just wanted to do anything to make the pain stop when we were arguing, and including killing myself. When our kids were like 1.5 and 2, I went into the closed garage and started the engine and ran it for like 10 minutes, and then I went inside the house, and Jim called the suicide prevention hotline. But I'd heard him tell friends that I was suicidal enough that he had the hotline suicide prevention number memorized. A lot of the things that I did in response to my pain was yell harsh words at my husband, and I did try to seek help. I probably went to about 20 different professionals, including pastors, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and they tried antidepressants and lithium. So I was given 2 diagnoses early on with depression and bipolar. I took 5 different parenting classes, like once before we even decided to have kids, and another one when I was pregnant, and another one when the kids were little. And I took them because, part of me really wanted to prevent my children ever feeling this harshness from me when I was in a rage. And I learned then the importance of talking about your feelings. I had talked to my kids about how they were angry they couldn't get that candy bar at the grocery store or whatever. I would try to help them understand their feelings, even though I was kind of a novice at myself. But I often felt lonely, hurt, and angry. About our 11th year, we separated for about 8 months, but we were in marriage counseling the whole time. And the therapist, the marriage counselor, mentioned borderline, and I wouldn't have anything to do with it. I already had 2 diagnoses. I wasn't going to get a third one. He also told Jim to just let the rage just pass by him, like just flow past him like it wasn't involving him at all. And what I did during that time was pretty much pretend that my rages didn't occur. I would go along day-to-day activities, raising the kids, and the rages still continued. And when I remember those years before family connections and DBT, I just remember years of pain and anger and hurt. So we were facing a second separation, and this was like the first half of our marriage. So I'll let Jim have a comment here.
So again, we've been married now total of 30 years, and for this first 15 years, that's when I remember in the first year of marriage that I started to see some depression that seemed kind of strong, and some occasional anger incidents, and that was like, that doesn't seem like you, and I didn't think it was you. I didn't know what it was, And I remember then it was sort of a curve that sort of, kind of grew in terms of intensity over the first 5 years or so. And during those years, here again, not very healthy on my part, I remember thinking of myself as like the Pillsbury Doughboy. It's like, something's going on with Kathleen. I don't know what it is. There's all this rage happening. And I'm like the doughboy where you can push in, and right afterward, he'll just pop right back and even giggle, and it just won't even matter to him. And obviously, I had a lot of growing that I need to do myself, but that is how I saw myself in those first 5 years. We did end up getting a lot of help. I think we counted at one point 20 different professionals in different arrangements, clergy, social workers, others. And I remember we were using a lot of conventional techniques at the time. Borderline, again, had only in passing been once or twice mentioned. And the conventional techniques didn't seem to help in the marriage context. Like some here may recall, for a long time it was popular to say, that's not okay with me. My boundaries, this is not okay with me. And more on that later when we come to validation shortly. But of course, that when I would say that would lead to huge escalations. It would not help.
Right.
So I did take that family. It was when we were about ready to separate a second time. I remember I was up almost all night and started to see borderline. This is now about year 15 in our marriage. And that was making sense for what we were going through. And that's when I got myself into Family Connections.
So Jim went to Family Connections, and he started validating me, and I suddenly began to think, wow, he's getting better. And I thought, I didn't want another diagnosis, especially not borderline, but I thought, if the skills are helping our marriage and I want to do anything I possibly can to help the marriage, then maybe there's something to DBT. And that's what led me into getting my therapy. About that time, we came up with our presentation called Porcupine Love, which I'm surrounding myself with porcupines. But that was the first time Jim and I were on the same page about borderline. And it was about the marriage of two porcupines where they each had quills and they each had soft parts. And I kind of liked the fact that I was more than just my rages. I was also loving and other qualities. And it was really hard to get DBT. I lived in Washington, D.C. area, and there were no DBT therapists when we first started out. And after we gave the porcupine presentation to some NAMI conferences, we urged there to be specialized care for people with borderline. And so a couple of years later, I was able to find one practice in Maryland, which was like a 2-hour drive from where I lived. And then I had a psychiatrist that lived in Richmond, which is another 2.5-hour drive. So it was just really important for me to get whatever skills I could get. And Jim says that my rages gradually decreased in intensity and frequency over time, over several years. Some of our communication skills that we used was like self-care. I would be really conscious about my eating and sleeping and exercising and just kind of being aware of myself. I also created these little cards that I had around the house that said, take a break. And I would just, like, when I felt myself getting dysregulated, would look at the card and just say, I need to take a break. Or Jim would say, we need to take a break. And I would go and do some DBT skills, breathing, mindfulness, some of my distress tolerance and self-validation, and a little bit of problem solving. So we found that using DBT skills helped in the moment, but they didn't repair damage that I had done to the relationship in my behaviors over the years. So we came across a book by John Gottman, who studied couples that over long periods of time, and he said that the biggest indicator of whether couples stayed together was whether they had a means of repair. Not that they didn't have fights, but when they had fights, they would do something to repair the relationship. And so we found that repair is really important for me to apologize and to help make things better. We learned that listening to each other's feelings was important for repairs. But the problem was, if I listened to Jim talking about his feelings, I would just become dysregulated and start thinking about, wish I were dead, and just wasn't very helpful for me to just try to listen to him. But we found that I could listen to his feelings for about 60 seconds. So we developed what
It's a
we call a
start.
60. And that would involve him telling me his feelings for about 60 seconds, and then I would summarize and say, did I get it? And we'd kind of repeat that till I got it. My second step would be to validate his feelings, say to him, I can understand you would feel hurt and angry when I'm raising my voice and yelling harsh words at you. Anyone would feel hurt and angry in that situation. And then I would own what was true. I would say, yes, it's true I raised my voice, and it's true I used harsh words, and I would apologize for that. But the third step would be, what can I or we do differently next time? And we would just try to brainstorm. What would we do? Sometimes we came up with ideas, like I could say my feelings instead of raising my voice, or maybe just go back to the take a break cards and do my DBT. So we also had a double 60, and that was when we would reverse roles, and if I wanted him to listen to my feelings, he could listen to them for 60 seconds, and he would validate and ask what we could do differently next time. So this worked for us for a while, but often when we did a double 60, Jim would let me choose who went first, and I usually like to go first. So once I had thought he heard my feelings, I was able to then listen to his feelings. So it worked out if I went first. So go ahead.
And so these we call them 60s, and there was just an everyday word for us. We would do it, and it would be a structure that we had covered in advance. It was sort of a safe structure. We could always stop it, and it would go both ways. It would go both ways, and it allowed me to be able to be heard. And I will say, so this is something that we got better at now in the second 15 years of marriage, sort of after family connections, after some DBT and so forth. But I wanted to add that, for that, along the way, validating through those years, that it's probably maybe the hardest thing that I remember doing. When a person is in the full, can I say fury of a rage? I mean, I've been angry I've put my fist through walls a couple times. I've been angry. When a person's angry, really, really angry, it's going to come out. And I know we talked about this a little bit earlier today, to validate someone when that anger feels like it's directed to you, the volume's high, the tone is harsh, and the words are specific, or experience is specifically, coming this direction. I felt like in the Matrix, or like being in a boxing ring in Matrix Together, where the punches would come and I would slow motion see them go by. I would try to, but by the way, I would first make sure that I felt okay for validating at a time like that, because my alternative is to take a break and I want to go to the other room or something. But if I wanted to do it, it's a purposeful decision on my part, and I would say, "Oh my gosh, you're really hurt and angry because when I said this, you were hearing me telling you that you're inadequate, and that no, of course that's going to hurt and be angry, and am I hearing that right?" And then you would blah 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 and so forth. But that was a very hard thing to do, and it got to the point where I was sort of able to do it, but that was no small thing. Go ahead.
Okay, so our marriage for the last year or two, we've been empty nesters, so we have a little bit more time working on our strategies. And I still feel that really sharp, white-hot searing pain, and sometimes it comes out 2 or 3 times a day, and the other days it doesn't happen at all. So I'm still dealing with the strong feelings, and I actually have been working on my DBT over last 10 years. I've gone through 3 courses. I'm in my 3rd course right now, so I hope I'm getting it by now, but each time I get more and more out of it, and I need the refreshers, it seems. So anyway, we've been doing DBT skills. We've been doing our 60s and our double 60s. And I've been thinking about when I'm in emotional storm, when I'm in that place where I can't really take in anything from him. I just say, I'll have to come back later and talk to you about what you're going through. And sometimes it's really hard for me to spot when these episodes are starting up. And we've learned that I often forget what I said at those times or what I did at those times. So we decided to do another technique we have is like doing a list for the week, and I brought some of my lists with me. For example, a month or two ago, we were doing some sort of repair, and maybe a 60. When talking about what I or we could do differently, we came up with the idea of doing this list where I say my feelings directly or say I'm triggered 30 times in 8 days. And so I have my list of my 30 times when I said my feelings or said I'm triggered. And it's just a way to help me think about my responses at the moment to try to redo my behaviors. Just talking about my feelings will help, but I often don't do that, so that's what I'm really working on at the moment. And I'm also, I had a list where I put down my thoughts of what I think about my own behavior, about my defensiveness. And some of the things I wrote down were, I'm triggered. When I'm triggered, I'm usually not aware of it. Second thing is, I usually continue talking and making things worse because I just want to get that emotion out. I also think that defensiveness is destructive to effective communication, and I'm sad at the thought of being defensive because there's part of me that wants to be a loving, caring person. And even though I have these episodes of anger, there's still part of me that wants to be fostering a good, loving relationship. So that's kind of been my motivation. Here's my third list that I brought with me. It doesn't have anything on it. That's because I haven't done it yet. But I'm working on this. I'm going to do 10 times where I stop myself from being defensive. And, that's what we're working on right now. We're also looking at making more positive statements to each other. I didn't grow up with receiving positives, and I'm not very good at doing positives, so I think I'm making a more purposeful effort to say positive things about Jim and try to build up that love bank.
So I think what we'd encourage you to hear is that sort of, earlier on, and I know we saw a chart earlier today, how the symptoms can grow early on, especially in the 20s, and then lessen over the years. And so we're now at the 30-year point, and the symptoms of sorry, we're keeping track of
time.
So just about. So as the symptoms drop, we have increased ability to create kind of the good regular stuff that we would, not the crisis stuff. And even though we've been married 30 years, we still, chip away at this. And all coming back to what you said about for John Gottman and what his study, also at the University of Washington, I don't know if he's down the street from Marshall Linehan or not, but it's that repairs are just so important to keep things going. And what we would just briefly add is that we do have 2 kids. We haven't really mentioned them. They're now in their mid-20s. But just very briefly, early on, we would educate them as we could from a very early age for them and tell them about illness and the condition. And then when an incident happened, I know that you would go to them.
Yeah, I would apologize to them and tell them that I overreacted. It was not about them. It's about me, how I responded. And I would say I didn't respond the right way. But they grew up, I think, learning that other people's emotions are not their responsibility, and not afraid to be with people that have emotions.
That was what we wanted them to learn. Yeah. And good stuff. So that was. We had also, we're actually, as we mentioned, we met in law school. The lawyers in us. We were parents. Sometimes parents have kind of emotional discipline. If you ever, as a parent, if you ever give discipline when you're angry, it may not go really, really well. And so we would try to guard against that. But we also had this system where we would allow an appeal. So if a kid didn't like the discipline, they could appeal to both of us. And every now and then we would change, either me or you. And if they already served their time out, which was our form of discipline, and it was overturned, they would have a credit for one time out. And they're both in their mid-20s now. Perry was asking last night how they have been, do we think, with all this? And don't actually know, but two thoughts, one for each comes to mind for them. One of them seems over the top okay in a mental illness situation. And I say that because he's been dating a gal now for about a year who has bipolar and at times really strong episodes. And he just sort of seems to cope through that. The other seems over the top with grit. He was president of his large university class, about 10,000 people. He probably had the lowest, he's now in law school, probably has the lowest or one of the lowest LSAT scores in his class, but he got in by disclosing the learning disability he had and how he compensated for that. He's got a 3.3 in law school, which was better than at least one of his parents. And he is now working for the Ohio governor part-time while going through law school. And I also wanted to add, for myself, there's no way I would have been able to do a lot of the things I've been doing in my career, working as a litigator and sort of being able to work in a courtroom with some emotional intelligence, which I definitely didn't have much at all before. And I'm not saying I have much now, but definitely a lot more than before. And also helping me, now I manage a law office with about 60 lawyers and maybe 75 people in all. And that sort of people smarts is very important. And a lot of the studies now show that while different skills will get someone to a senior manager or senior executive level, it's the emotional intelligence that will be the best indicator of how that person does. So I wanted to mention that too, and I think that covers what we had in mind.
If we had questions?
So, yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Hang on.
Thank you. Thanks. Grab our stuff here.
Wait, don't run off. Wait, come back. This is for you. I want you to see that. See the appreciation.
I do, thank you.
We are, let me see how much we're over. Oh, not much. Are there any questions you'd like to ask about coping with BPD in a marriage and with a couple? Yes.
First, I want to thank you for sharing that with us. I wasn't immersed like that, and I didn't make it.
Understood. Very understandable. Very understandable.
The main reason I did it was my wife never recognized the diagnosis, that she would never agree to anything. Unfortunately, we didn't go to the right doctor, so it was always just medication and so forth, and it didn't work. But now, me out of the equation, she's turned her rage against the kids. Grown-up kids. They're all parents and so forth.
Actually, I really focus on parenting skills. That I was so insecure about the relationship I had with my parents that I wanted to have a totally different relationship with my kids. And I mean, I did yell at the kids, but like I said, I would apologize and say I was out of order. But I know that I had episodes with them, yes, and they could need therapy for those, and I would support that.
I mean, question spot on. Honestly, from my standpoint, I thought the volume and anger that I'm sure I have not had borderline. For those who have it, life's life. Something has to. Most strong emotions have to come out some way. I thought it was mostly for us, and they would be there, and you would apologize even when that happened to me. Now, there was a time when I started to get more assertive. Because I thought there was an increased ability to manage them more. And so I was starting to slow things down, and I thought for a while that you might have started doing more with the kids, but I know that we talked about that, and you kept apologizing, and I don't remember seeing that again. That was just from my own.
Yeah, I would say Jim bore the brunt of most of my rages, yeah.
But again, it's lessened. So I mean, it like the curve that Charlie was showing. It went up, and then over time, kind of dropped down, quite a bit.
So
Is that helpful? Okay.
So I hope you'll forgive me, but I'm going to limit the questions because of time. But I saw your hand first in the back.
I'm not married, but the relationships that I've had in the past have been kind of difficult to go through. So I have two questions. One for you: when you get to your rages to the extent where your husband doesn't know how to be able to reciprocate that, what do you do to kind of I guess pause yourself before reacting towards something that he doesn't understand?
Yeah, I worked on this in my therapy. It was really hard to try to not be driven by those emotions, and it was just something I worked on over a period of time that actually Jim would often recognize when we needed to take a break, even though I was still kind of getting up and into my feelings. He would say, we need to take a break here, and I respected that. I was able to, that was a ground rule that I had agreed to. So most of the time, I think there were a couple times when I still kept going, but I think most of the time I would just take the time that I needed to, feel my feelings and be okay with them and come up with a different response.
And what I would just add is that I think that in contrast to a parent situation, that in a marriage situation, it is very important for sustainability to back and forth, helping each other. And I do think that the validation skills, to my own way of thinking, it's sort of like, I think that it was mentioned at lunch today, that the spouse who does not have borderline, in a way, acts like a therapy aid to the spouse with borderline. But when you think about it, what if it was like a cancer or some other illness? You might learn to change bandage dressings or, help with other sorts of things. And this is a little bit like that.
Right, when he would validate, that would kind of de-escalate for the moment too. Yeah. So that was a really big help.
So my question to you and your husband, when she apologizes to you, does that get to the point where you're providing, sometimes hearing sorry over and over and over again?
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
Gonna change?
Well, it's not effective, right? So, right. So that's what you just addressed the big content of our relationship, because, and I think Walt Wandrin, if I'm saying his name right, once wrote a book, and this was the sort of thing he talked about too, that as part of the three-part step Kathleen talked about, it was sort of the active listening, validation, and then what is there anything I or we can do differently? And then as part of a repair for me, I would say, just what you said, actually. And so it just wouldn't make sense. I mean, sorry's a start, but when things are happening, then it's time for changes. And all the good teaching from Charlie today and over the years, and I'm just melting in appreciation, Charlie, for everything that you've done and being here and helping. I think Perry may have left for a flight, but everything you started with that led to Family Connections, as I'm seeing it, and what a difference in our own lives. And that's just a big help, because it's this problem solving that you can bring in amidst this very hard situation. So as part of the problem solving, I'm saying I'd like something concrete here, like most recently these lists. Let's just overdo it with lists and go through this on a week's, and we would agree to it. It's something we would talk about. And it's a lot easier for us to do it now. We're empty nesters. When you have kids in the house, there's a trillion demands.
Okay, so I'm going to take one more question. We have an announcement from Charlie before we leave, so I want one more question. Yes, right there. You're the gentleman. I saw your hand first.
Given the resistance to the name and the label, after years of knowing about this, as a therapist, I'm still at a loss as to how to approach someone who's never heard about it, and without them freaking out. And given the fact that powers that be haven't yet been able to change things.
I think what helped me was experiencing validation And I said, I don't care what label they put on me. If this helps, I'm going to try it. I just don't want to keep going through this pain and the same thing happening over and over. And I was in so much pain, it was like, I'll do anything. Call me whatever you want to call me. And that's how I started DBT. And, it is a hard diagnosis to accept, and probably takes a little bit of time for somebody to process that.
What I would add is that, at least to my way of thinking, a diagnosis is helpful because there are certain treatments for BPD that they're not for, bipolar, you wouldn't get those treatments, or maybe major depression. And I think in our first 15 years, we were treatment as usual for a lot of depression and bipolar and so forth. And yet there was this underlying borderline that just seems to overpower the other diagnoses, whether they're accurate or to whatever extent they're accurate. The other thing is that while I've not been, don't serve in the mental health profession, I do serve in another profession, and if one doesn't have the tools to deal with it, for the professional, that could be really, really hard. I mean, you can help, and there was a therapist who gave you a lot of supportive therapy, and you end up got a master's in library science, kind of left the law area, but still, we were about ready to separate a second time, and so finding some way to help work with the borderline, easier said than done, perhaps. I know that there's an increased specialized treatment. We've been hearing a lot about DBT today. There are a couple few others. I think DBT probably is the most prevalent from what I can tell. But I know that if I were a professional, I would sure like the ability to refer someone to a trained specialist if I didn't have that myself. But.
My sincere thanks to you.
Okay.
I think your being here makes a difference, and I know someone out there you've made a difference for. So thank you so very much. Thank you to everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
It takes courage to get up on this stage. And so my thanks to Charlie, who's making a difference all over the world, and NEA BPD, and everyone. But the thing I want to say now, because I've mentioned other people throughout the day that have been fabulous, but now I want to mention you. Because you gave up your Saturday. It's a gorgeous day out there. And you're here, and it's hard to listen all day long. But each one of you are going to go out, and you're going to have a different view, and you're going to have information that you're going to be able to share, and that you're going to be able to put in action. And damn it, we're going to change it. We are.
I know we're way over. I just want to make a quick announcement, but I can't not say that I'm very touched by your presentation. I'm really very touched, and I think it's such unbelievable radical vulnerability that the two of you show in coming up here and being willing to do this for the sake of people to know about it. Thanks. I don't think I've ever quite seen that. In a setting like this. So it's really special. Thank you.
Welcome.
I want to get a porcupine.
Very good.
Okay, I just had forgotten to announce something. A few days ago when I was preparing to really put this thing together that I just did, which is, I haven't taught this before, with an eye on families. And I started to realize I wanted to work it out a little more. And so you guys are guinea pigs. It's kind of early in me figuring this out. I'm hoping I'll figure it out more. But I put together a many-page sort of protocol that incorporates all of these principles that I went through, all 15 of them, in an organized way, with trying to lay it out in a way that if you have a problem to solve in your family, it's not for a therapist, but if you might consider the following steps and protocol. So I did it, and I thought, this will be a one-page thing that I'll hand out to you today, and then it's an 11-page thing. So I trimmed it down from where it was, but it's 11. And then I mailed it to Christina last night, and she's over here, and she came up with a plan about having what? How are we going to do this?
It's going to be emailed to all of the participants when you registered. We got an email address that the council will send it out. If you were a walk-in and you wrote your email address, you just might want to make sure that they have it legibly. So they send it to the right email address, but it should go out next week. We should all see it.
So what I want to ask of you in return is if you read through this, and it's still not quite what I would want it to be. I'd want really a lot more specific examples, but it's sort of like a formula, a template, a way to put together these different paradigms in your own family, whether you are one person trying to solve something with one other, or you're one person trying to solve something bigger in your family with more people, or whether you're two people that are trying to solve something with one person, whatever, trying to come up with something so that people who don't have a therapist who's good to help work this out, you can, see if you can figure out some solutions. Now, so what I would ask you in return is just if any of you read through this and you think, yeah, I found this helpful, but I think it'd be great if you did more on this, or if you added this in, or just through your not personal knowledge, if you would email me back and give me any suggestions about what you found helpful, what you didn't find so helpful, what you think could be amplified upon, I would really appreciate it. There's nothing like that kind of feedback. Can't get that from another professional, just that hasn't been through this. So, all right. So that I didn't want to prolong it any further. Are we at the end, Karen? Is it wherever everything is? Is there anything else?
There's always one more thing. Oh, I'm loud, right? On the back page of your program, there's a sheet, and it's asking questions of what you thought of today, how we can improve, what you'd like to see for next year. So if you would, just fill it out and put it on the NEA BPD table. And thank you all so much.